Hello and welcome to another video and podcast from fantasyfootballscout.co.uk. My name is David and today I'm joined by Neil, or you may know him as Mr. Team News in the FPL community, because of course team news and injuries are back for the start of the new season. We've had all sorts going on in pre-season with people getting injured left, right and centre, especially in the last couple of days. And as we hurtle towards that game week 1 deadline, when those team news bits of information and the press conferences become even more important, we thought we'd get started 1 week early to get your dates and times in the diary. Friday afternoon is all about team news. And as I said, I'm joined by Neil, who is, I want to say, responsible for all of this. I don't necessarily mean, in a way to put pressure on your shoulders, but this very much is your bread and butter of what you do for Scout, isn't it, Neil? So it must be nice to have team news back.
It certainly is, yeah. I think going back 5 years when we both first started, that was the first meeting we had with Mark and Chris. Was the team news was given to me, and ever since I've been doing it every single week pretty much. Yeah, it's a bit of a love-hate relationship because it's quite stressful when all those press conferences are going on, but it is quite probably my most favoured part of the job, especially when you get it right. Not so enjoyable when you get it wrong, but when you put a bit of time in sort of researching things and that team prediction turns out to be accurate, then it does sort of pay dividends. But yeah, I must admit I've had enjoyed my Fridays for the last 10 weeks. It'll be a lot different this time next week.
Yeah, well, why don't you tell us a little bit about what next Friday is going to be like for yourself and the rest of the editorial team, because it's very much going to be all hands on deck. It's always a very, dare I say it, stressful time. Everything's happening. And of course, you have your team news video as well. So talk us through what that Friday is going to look like and what people can expect from you on that day in terms of content on the website and on YouTube as well.
Yeah, I'll just retract the word stressful there. I can hear people getting their tiny violins out, and I watch press conferences for a living. It's hardly backbreaking work. But yeah, it's busy on a Friday. We haven't got the list to yet, obviously, for the times for the press conferences. But most weeks, when there's a Saturday deadline, for example, you will get all 20 managers giving pre-match press conferences. You may get sort of 5 or 6 on the Thursday, and then the rest of them on the Friday. And what I do for the site is just listen to as many of them as I can, either live or later on, once they drop on YouTube. And off the back of that, not just do a predicted lineup, which you'll find the team used to have, and the accompanying blurb, which is actually more important than the predicted lineup. We've got an injuries and bans database, for example. We had the latest entries to that. We've got obviously got a Twitter account that Partridge mans as well on press conferences days. That used to be what I did as well, and yourself, David. And we also do a live article blog type thing on the site, which is be top of Fantasy Football Scout for about 3 hours on a Friday afternoon. So yeah, it's there's a lot of things we're updating as they're happening, but the predicted lineups which we're going to go through at the moment obviously are very much preliminary and based on what we've seen this summer, and some of them probably need to be tweaked even further. But we'll get those a lot more, hopefully, accurate when those press conferences have been staged, because at that point, who's injured, who's a doubt, and we'll have seen the final pre-season friendlies, of course, which are mostly this weekend. And they are a great pointer we found in previous years, the final pre-season friendlies. Not everyone, I think Newcastle sometimes they're a bit tougher to call because they're having 2 friendlies across 24 hours, so they might split their squad. But a lot of teams will name their strongest lineup in preparation for game week 1 in their final pre-season friendly. So keep your eyes peeled this weekend for those final warm-up games, because a lot of the names you're seeing on the team sheets will be the same ones that appear next weekend.
Yeah, lots of clues in pre-season, as you say. And of course, you and Joe will be live basically every Friday, or depending on whenever the deadline is. We do get some Tuesday versions of these, discussing the team news and the predicted lineups in video form on YouTube. And my understanding is that's not necessarily always exactly the same time, because it's very much dependent on when those press conferences are. Am I right in thinking that you were slave to the FPL real managers as well as the those of us playing the game out there?
Yeah, to an extent. I mean, we did tend to stick to around about 2:30, 3 o'clock last season. I think it was mostly 3. When there's a Friday deadline, we sometimes brought that forward a little bit. But generally speaking, the press conferences are wrapped up by around about 2:30. on a Friday. You get some stragglers now and again. Steve Cooper sometimes that press conference isn't reported on immediately. I don't know if it's some kind of embargo thing. And occasionally you get like a 4 o'clock press conference. But whatever you don't get in those video roundups on YouTube, you will get covered on the site later in the day in article form, and of course in the all important predicted lineups tab.
Which is very much the accumulation of all the knowledge and information that you've brought together. I suppose the tricky part of that sometimes is interpreting what the managers are saying and maybe reading between the lines. And I know there's a couple of managers that you definitely won't send Christmas cards to ever again, probably after a number of press conferences. So that must be an additional challenge sometimes, just trying to work out exactly what they're saying without saying it, or vice versa.
Yeah, it's become an increasing problem over the years. I would love to have been a lineup predictor in sort of the 90s, when I think is when the relationship between press officer and or journalist and football club was very, very close. You'd be allowed to go on drinking sessions with the players and meet the manager in person and strike up friendships and get all sorts of insight. Now they're very guarded. A lot of them don't like to give anything away. The win at all cost mentality as well. I guess when there's a lot of money and jobs on the line, managers are increasingly reticent to disclose even injury information. So it's not even getting the lineup out. It's finding out who's actually injured. Because a lot of them, I can think of a few. Moyes, Marsh was getting a bit like that when he was at Leeds. Solskjaer was quite a famous one as well. I think there's a few coming from the Championship. Heckingbottom's apparently got a bit of a reputation. There's loads of them actually. The more I think about it, who are cagey with their updates, and you kind of got to either read between the lines or seek alternative sources as well, like message boards and journalists for the latest injury information, because certainly the managers just don't want to play ball.
Yeah, so it's a strange world we live in a world where information is so readily accessible, more than it ever has been before in pretty much every other walk of life. All of a sudden, who's playing for a Premier League football team this week has gone in the opposite direction. It's crazy stuff. But of course, that is very much something you're used to now, interpreting all of that. And people can look forward to accessing that content either on the website, on YouTube, or both when the season starts. As Neil says, we're going to have a look at some predicted lineups in a minute, which, as he said, are largely provisional at this stage because we've been watching some pre-season games and following those minutes. And that is, of course, ample opportunity for me to remind you guys that if you want full access to the pre-season minutes tracker, then that's one of the many things that you're going to get as part of your Fantasy Football Scout membership. And if you sign up now, you can save up to 30% on those pre-season prices. Many other things come along with that as well, with the comparison tools, tables, points projections, transfer planners, etc., and drafts from the best fantasy managers around, including some former winners. So make sure you've sorted that out before the start of the season. And of course, if you like these kind of videos, then make sure you give this video a like, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Helps us know what you want to see more of. And of course, hit that bell notification as well so you don't miss a thing. But let's jump into some predicted lineups now, which Neil said he was enjoying his Fridays. Here I am, 1 week early, asking him to predict some lineups. But yeah, we've got Arsenal on the screen to start with, and I suppose there's a few high-profile headlines that have fed into this in the last couple of days. Jesus has picked up an injury, and of course Saka wasn't involved. That sounds much less serious. So yeah, what can you tell us about the Gunners so far? A lot of interest in them from a fantasy perspective.
Yeah, Jesus is the big one, and he's going to almost certainly miss game week 1 now. Arteta said, when was this? On Wednesday, I believe. It was the Monaco game. He said that Jesus has had a little procedure on his knee, and he's going to be out for a few weeks. So what was that? That'll have been about 10 days before the start of the season. And if he's true to his word, if a few weeks means a few weeks, then obviously he's not going to be ready for game week 1. There was a bit more positive news on Zinchenko. I think he said he was hopeful that he'd train, and he's close. We haven't seen him in pre-season, so he's someone who could almost certainly come out of that predicted lineup. Saka was the only other line I note from that Monaco game. He was ill, and he was on the bench, so he was obviously fit enough to be in the squad. But I think the sickness sort of came on as the game was progressing, and he was remain unused, but he should be fine. It's a Community Shield, of course, this weekend for Arsenal, so we should get a better clue of the lineup. I think the main conundrums are the obvious one, really. Who deputises for Jesus? Is it going to be Nketiah? Is it going to be Trossard? I saw both of those players deputised in the spring when he was last injured. Havertz, I suppose, is a third option as well, but so far we've only seen him in midfield in pre-season for Arsenal. And actually, Havertz maybe not even guaranteed to start because we saw Declan Rice play that number 8, that Xhaka role against Monaco. He got into a box a few times. Certainly, they look more solid with I think Partey and Rice together. But it's Nottingham Forest at home on Gameweek 1, so you would think he'd name a more attack lineup for that. I could see Rice and Partey starting in the Community Shield against City together, and then maybe he names a more attack lineup for Forest, who are really in sorry shape and were poor on the travels last season. So yeah, those two spots. Left back obviously as well. We've seen Tommy Asu play there in pre-season. We've seen Tierney. I think we saw the new signing as well, Timber from Ajax. I think he came from. Who's versatile, can play across that back line. We've seen him at right back as well, inverting into that midfield. So that's obviously a spot where Zinchenko's fitness will dictate who plays in. I think when he's fit, Arteta has liked him to play that. It's quite key for that system. Apart from that, I think it's fairly straightforward at the moment. Obviously, David Raya, if he does sign for Arsenal, that would put the cat amongst the pigeons in goal. But apart from that, it's the core of the team from last season, including a fit again Saliba as well, who's now back.
Yeah, there's lots to like for the most part here for fantasy managers invested in Arsenal. I suppose perhaps the one person who maybe has a minor question mark over them and it's sort of impacted people's assessment of his credentials is probably Martinelli. We've actually got someone in the chat who's wondering, is FPL Alexander-Arnold, presumably not Trent himself, but he says Martinelli through the middle and Trossard on the left. Do you see that as an option? Could that potentially happen, do you think?
Possibly. I mean, we saw. I think regardless of who starts there, who's on the team sheet as the nominal number 9, you see a lot of changing between those two players anyway. You saw that with Jesus and Martinelli. You saw it with Trossard and Martinelli as well. When Trossard was the nominal centre forward, there was a lot of switching between the two. So I don't think it really matters that much. The one who Martinelli actually didn't seem to have much of a rapport with in the spring was Nketiah, who I think the consensus was that he didn't quite offer that movement that the others did up top, more of a sort of penalty box predator. So Martinelli wasn't getting in those goal scoring positions, but Nketiah's looked all right in pre-season actually. He did a bit more of that link-up player that was perceived to be a weakness. So I don't think it's I think again the Community Shield will be a bit of a tell maybe for Gameweek 1, but he scored against Monaco and Nketiah, so I think he's obviously laid down a marker there, and he signed a new contract as well. So Arteta may keep the faith.
Yeah, as you say, the advantage that we do have, of course, is that Community Shield, which is all eyes are going to be on that. It'll be interesting, as you said there. Do they play situational? Do they tailor to the opponent and maybe play something a bit more conservative? But even if they do, it's hard to see them play that style of football at home against Nottingham Forest. So I think from an FPL perspective, probably don't need to worry too much. And I suppose Jesus not being involved maybe makes life easier. If Martinelli's X minutes probably have gone up with Jesus just out of the picture, because he could deputise in the middle, for example.
Yeah, and Trossard is a positional rival to Martinelli on the left, and if Trossard's playing through the middle, then that takes out one of his challenges. But we will see at Wembley.
Yeah, Wembley's going to be. I think it's going to be a good game for neutrals as well. To be honest, even if you're not looking from FPL perspective, to have those two teams go up against each other is going to be very, very fascinating. Well, thank you, FPL Alexander-Arnold, for that question in the chat. If anyone else has questions about some specific little niche nuances within all of these team sheets, then now is the time to ask those questions, of course, because we have got Mr. Team News in the house. So let's progress on to Aston Villa then. And there's actually also a lot of questions here as well, perhaps maybe in defence, because there's a number of people looking at a defender. I mean, I certainly want to put one in a rotation with maybe a Palace defender, or some people have been rotating with Chelsea, for example. Now we've got Colwill. So we really want to know who's the most nailed on 4.5 million defender. On the provisional lineup, we've got Digne, Mings, Concert and Cash as the back four. But my guess is that you're not necessarily all that settled on that.
That's even changed today. That's probably actually a little graphic. Yeah. At the moment, it's Cash, Concert, Mings and Torres. So what we've seen in the last couple of pre-season friendlies especially is a lopsided defence where you've got one of the recognised fullbacks, with Cash in this case, but also Digne, Moreno when he's fit. But then a centre half playing at fullback. So we've had Konsa playing at right back in pre-season. We've had Torres playing at left back as well. And I was talking to Tom Freeman about this. He's a Villa fan, of course, my deputy head. And he's even in the dark himself. Kit went to him for some kind of insight. But I think what's going to happen is Emery's going to change this quite regularly. And they've also got the Europa Conference League to compete for this season. So there'll be, I guess, rotation with that competition in mind as well. But I think he'll just tailor his back four to whoever they're playing to an extent. I think, for example, game week 1, you've got, I would say Newcastle's more attackable down their left. So Cash being the right back might be given more license to get a Dan Burn. Whereas, on our side, we've got a lot of creativity through Trippier, through Tonali as well now if he gets to start, and he's got a wicked delivery on him, so they might go a bit more defensive on the left. Now that's just us speculating, but Emery's pretty much said that already. He says there is going to be games this season where he's going to play with quite a few games where he's going to play with this lopsided back four with a third centre half playing as a fullback, and then the fullback who do start is given license to bomb on. So probably Martin is your securest route. I would say probably at the moment, I would say Mings just because his two main partners, Torres and Conte, have been playing a fullback as well, and he's been sort of the mainstay at centre half. I would say Carlos is probably fourth in line at the moment. So Mings just, but I wouldn't like to put any money on it.
You wouldn't want to put any cash on it, I think you mean.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, I think further forward, it's slightly less contentious at the moment. Tielemans had a really good game last night against Lazio, but I think at the moment the thinking is that Kamara and Luiz will start the season, certainly against Newcastle. Trickier away again. McGinn seems to have be a fixture of Emery's lineups at the moment. And Diaby's come in and he was signing, of course, he's a bit like Bailey, a bit like Buendia. He can either play on the wing or he can play through the middle. I think his defensive skill set isn't really that of a wide midfielder. I think there was suggestions that he's not so good at tracking back. So he might be the one playing effectively out of position, really, as a second striker behind Watkins. We've seen that in the last two friendlies. He has played through the middle. And it's been Philogene or Buendia or Bailey playing out wide. Ramsey, when he's fit, of course, he'll miss the start of the season, but he'll be one of those as well. So that left wing spot's probably the most up for grabs at the moment. And there will be rotation as the season goes on. Tielemans will get his chance, but just for game week 1 at the moment, I would think that front six is pretty close to what we're expecting.
And of course, with the European football involved as well, that probably just throws in an additional spanner in terms of that rotation. Not only have they got more games to play, they're probably going to play against lots of different types of systems that Emery's going to want to tailor, his team to. So it's going to be tricky, and it saddens me a little bit that Martinez is the one who's the most assured because he's the wrong price. He's the wrong price for a rotation, isn't he? So it is tricky. And interestingly enough, actually there is a lot of interest in Diaby. We had David and Alan in the chat both asking a question you've actually already answered, Neil, about the chances of Diaby playing a second striker, and it does look fairly strong. I think my only other question, and actually this is now just more for my own team, do you think that there's some short-term value in Digne based around the fact that Moreno's out till we think perhaps September? So if someone was looking for the first 4 game weeks, do you think they might get away with it with Digne? Or has he burned too many of us before?
I don't think it's even that. I don't think it's even his troll status. I think it's just that uncertainty week to week. I wouldn't go there with Digne. He might start one game in whole, but he might be on the bench the very next week. And do you want that from your 4.5? Is 90 minutes exactly what you want? As an emergency sub or as a occasional start? I think you want someone who's secure with their minutes, and I don't think Cash is that. And Moreno's going to be back, I think, after the September international break. It's game week 5. So I don't think you're going to be booking a transfer in for a 4.5 defender at this early stage. I would avoid.
Yeah, That's very true. When you put it like that, I feel like I've learned something. So yeah, I'll have to go back to the drawing board and might have to be Mings. But it doesn't feel great. But I don't know. We'll see with the additional preseason games. We'll see what we get. Let's move on to Bournemouth now. Probably don't need to spend too long here. I've stuck a predicted lineup on the screen. People are probably more interested in whether or not they're in sufficient levels of disarray that they need a Liverpool player for game week 2. Would you say that's probably like the main need for Bournemouth information at the moment?
Yeah, and it's the set players as well. Actually, I mean, I've seen a lot of people talking about Salah in the last few days, but Trent, I think his popularity is dwindling slightly. He was in a lot of first drafts and then slightly dropped off in ownership. People realising they can spread that cash around a little bit more further forward if they don't go with him. But Bournemouth's record of set players last season was terrible, and that's continued on this summer. Actually, even under the change of manager, there's one friendly recently. I can't remember which one it was. Where let me try to find it now. Anyway, yeah, they conceded. I think both the goals they conceded in that game were from set players, and it's an ongoing weakness. I think it was against Southampton. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, July 25th. They do look more sort of a bit more better going forward. They've sort of been playing this 4-4-1-1 with Christie actually is the advanced number 10 in quite a few of the games. Billen a bit further back. Billen actually missed out last game with a minor injury. But Billen's been the number 8, and Christie's been a bit further forward and has impressed. There's new signing to go in there as well. Clive, he's an option on the flank. A word for the left back as well. Kirkes. Now I'm going to butcher a lot of names in this team news video because I've not done my pronunciation research yet. Not that I do it anyway, but I've already seen these names written down and not said in commentary. So I'll apologise in advance for these. But yeah, Kirkes, if that is how you pronounce his name, very much of the Charlie Daniels school of Bournemouth left back. Loves to get forward, and is highly rated. I mean, obviously, you counter that with Bournemouth's goals conceded column last year, and they just can't keep clean sheets. So you're going to get attacking returns, but not many clean sheets. But he's someone who looks quite exciting, and that is my particular lineup at the moment. However, we have got one more friendly as well. Kelly and Tavernier are injured, so they may come back into thinking when they're fit. Tavernier certainly, and as I say, Clive is a possibility on one of the flanks as well.
I think the one thing that jumps out there is if we've got a very attacking left back, he might potentially leave Mohamed Salah with no marker. That'd be nice.
That's true. Yeah, that's a really good point there. Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised actually if I don't know if Kelly's going to be back by then. I think they were hopeful, but if they went with a more, defensive-minded option there, like Kelly, he hasn't played much in pre-season at all actually. So whether he's going to be match fit enough for that, I don't know. But that's a very good point.
Well, there we are. We've covered off. We've spoken about Bournemouth. We've done our job. We've talked about them. Let's move on now to a different team beginning with B, but however, much more interest in how they're going to line up, and it's Brentford. And you've currently got them as a 3-5-2, which I'm going to guess is to do with who they're playing in game week 1. I imagine.
Yeah, I have.
Yeah, might change from week to week.
It might change, and I am thinking more and more that we might see the 4-3-3 because I believe that's what he went with against Spurs towards the end of the season. Remember when Brentford went to Spurs and won? I think they played a 4-3-3. I'll go back and check that. But generally speaking, when Brentford face a bigger team, and you'll know this already from my team's entries, they play a 3-5-2 with wing backs, and when they're facing more winnable opposition, they go with a 4-3-3. Now Spurs, where do Spurs fall? Are they a big 6 team anymore? Are they more winnable opposition? I think you saw that with what Frank went with in that Spurs game last season. So that might, I'm more and more thinking, particularly as we haven't really seen the 3-stopper system in pre-season. I don't think that much yet from Brentford. I'm thinking more and more that he may go with a 4-3-3. Drop Collins, who's the new centre half, and put in maybe Lewis Potter, who's looked quite bright in pre-season, alongside Mbumo and Wissa up top. But obviously, the big name missing from there is Tony, who's suspended now till January.
Yeah, which of course does open up Mbumo to potentially play in that front two when they have it. And I suppose, as you say, it's very situational. It's going to depend on who they play, but also as you say, like what Thomas Frank actually thinks of that opposition is probably more important than what we
Yeah,
think of them. You know, you can still, I think, put Spurs into a top 6 filter in the members area, but yeah, maybe we
you
do need to
can.
have a word with our development team about maybe changing that. No disrespect, of
Yeah,
course, but you know, it could be. I mean, the Spurs this year are going to be very, very different style of play. So, you know, all bets are off in many respects about Spurs this year until we really see them play this all-attacking style football in the Premier League. So, you know, it's in many ways hard to predict this Brentford lineup than perhaps if they were facing a team that wasn't, you know, brand new in the way that it's going to be setting itself up.
yeah, exactly. I did just have a quick look there when you were talking, and Brentford did actually go with a 4-3-3 against Spurs in May, so maybe they will do that again. Just as a quick point now, this is one of the lineups that hasn't been updated since mid-July, and we've got obviously David Raya between the sticks, but that's looking more and more unlikely now. It seems like he's going to be on his way, and Flecken will be between the posts for Brentford.
Yeah. Yeah, lots of us in the Fleck Republic, although it is a republic that is dwindling because, I mean, you've caught some of the preseason games. Have you been as unimpressed as I have been with him? There's a lot of goals he should be
Yeah,
conceding.
he's looked a bit wobbly, hasn't he? I mean, the thing is, I mean, and David Reyes was similar when he first joined Brentford. He had I remember writing the Brentford promoted series a couple of seasons ago, and he did come with a reputation as someone who could make a rig now and again. There was a really high profile one. I think was it against Blackburn when they were in the Championship. It was a really big error. But Flacken's distribution looks like Reyes. You know, he's excellent with the ball at his feet, and that's obviously a primary consideration now for not just Brentford but for a lot of clubs. But yeah, I must admit, in pre-season, he's flapped it across or two. He got caught in no man's land for that. Was it a Dingra goal for Brighton? There's been a couple of moments like that, but you want to get those errors out of the way in pre-season, and hopefully he'll find his feet and his hands. What the point?
Yeah.
But yes, that has. Yeah, we say don't pay too much attention to pre-season friendlies and the results, but you can't help but notice stuff like that when you're watching the games, and it does subconsciously sort of enter your train of thought, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Although, actually, you made an excellent point there when you think about it, about the fact that if they make mistakes in pre-season, maybe that's good. Maybe they're going to learn from them. I never thought of it that way before.
Yeah,
Because people sometimes turn around and go, "Oh, I've had a bad pre-season." Well, and then in many seasons, we've seen clubs at all levels of football have a bad pre-season and start really well. So these things can happen, can't they? So yeah, time will tell on the Flecken front. You have mentioned Brighton, so let's talk about them now, if you can do so without maybe twitching, because in terms of predicting this is just a nightmare, right?
yeah, and it's only going to get harder when Europa League starts when's that after Gameweek 5. So the rotation might be kept to a minimum in the first month or so, but still anticipating that Gameweek 1 team's going to be hard. Again, and this is going to be a line I'm going to repeat throughout this video. The final preseason game is going to be worth watching, not least because we've not seen Dunk or Solly March yet. We're not too far away. De Zerbi was talking more that he didn't want to risk them because of ongoing issues, but I don't think they've played a minute in pre-season yet. Let me find my trusty tracker and see if they have or not. No. Oh, sorry, Marsh played 45 minutes in July and then didn't feature since. That was against Chelsea and hasn't featured. Dunk hasn't played at all this summer. So we'll be looking for signs that they're anywhere near fitness this weekend. If they are, of course, then they are one of the Dunk's certainly first name on the team sheet. March has got more competition than he used to, but he played more than he did last year. Beyond that, there was a suggestion that Enciso got a knock against who they were in their penultimate friendly, and then they didn't feature last time out. But yeah, it would have been against Brentford, and they didn't feature against Newcastle. The one thing was that Newcastle friendly, I think, came very quickly after the Brentford game, so he was using different players anyway. So there's maybe nothing much to be read into that. But yeah, so I think under the assumption that neither Dunk or March will start, and that might change, and Milner as well, by the way, who's also injured. This is what I went with, and it's Gross at right back, and Gross has again played all over the place in pre-season, Mr. Versatile. We've seen Veltman playing at centre half, covering for Dunk and Van Heck, who was sent off. So Veltman could be needed at centre half, ergo Gross needed a right back. Stupidan's back. He's had his first minutes after a belated return. It's probably at the front four, which are the most contentious ones. Now, Ferguson I think, was an early pre-season bandwagon. That's very much died a death now, I think. He's even said himself he expects to be rotated. There's now 3 players, him, Welbeck, and Pedro, who are capable of playing that line leading role. João Pedro is obviously more versatile as well. He can play in the number 10 or wider. But we've seen Lallana and Welbeck, the old hands, playing in the number 10 role and up front respectively quite a bit this pre-season. And we saw that Lallana was twisted quite a lot by De Zerbi. He's almost been forgotten about in the last few months because he was injured for the run-in. But until the point he got injured, he was playing, I would say, maybe about 70% of the games in that number 10 role. Starting, I mean. So, that's Enciso's main path to the first team. Again, he's versatile, he can play in other positions. But Lallana's had more minutes than Enciso in pre-season. Welbeck's had more minutes than Ferguson. Not always a given that it's gonna pan out that way in come game week 1, but definite uncertainty enough for me to not go near either player, and only have Mitoma and Estupiñán as my Brighton picks.
Yeah, I have to say, looking at this predicted lineup, it is gross in many ways. There's so many names that no one's talking about, and a lot of the ones that everybody's talking about aren't in it. And of course, it is provisional, of course, but all of the different issues you've raised there just go to show that there's only a few positions where we can be relatively sure. I mean, Estupiñán is, I think, fairly auto-include for a lot of people at this point. Gross, as you say, very versatile, which perhaps hinders him from an FPL perspective. So yeah, it's tough work. I think that people are sort of largely treating them as a short-term investment, especially in attack, because they should stiffen up when other teams get better. So maybe we'll be okay if we can just guess the first 3 and then we can go somewhere else.
That's it. That's pretty much it. Yeah, I mean, I should mention Caicedo's not in that lineup either. I only left him out because of the ongoing transfer speculation. He might end up staying now, at least till the end of August, and then he may be snapped up then. But obviously, he comes into the thinking in centre midfield as well.
Yeah, he's a very good player. Let's move on to Burnley now. So a lot has changed about Burnley since they were last in the Premier League. And if you want some more information on that, we did a whole video/podcast on their style of play and what it means for their lineup. Probably a 4-2-3-1. And anyone who's confused, this isn't the wrong way around. They do have a striker called Foster. That is not Ben, who should be in goal. But the key thing here really is those 4 million defenders, and I think we've got 3. Yeah. Have we got 3 in there in your predicted lineup, or is it 2?
I think we have. Yes, we have. Now this is, I wouldn't say it's quite at the same level as Brighton, sorry, but there's quite a bit of uncertainty even now, because we've seen, a company likes an inverted fullback as well. We've seen Roberts doing that last season. We saw Maatsen doing as well, but he's now back at Chelsea. Roberts played as a number 6 in like Trent in one of the pre-season friendlies. Al-Dakhil as well, it was normally a centre half, was inverting from left back in one of the pre-season friendlies. So there's quite a lot of uncertainty. My main bet from the 4 million defenders, it remains the same, and that's Beckenbauer. The centre half who was like Neale starting last season. He seems to be the most secure as one of the the mainstay at centre half, while all rotate around him. There's also Ekdal. There's also Charlie Taylor as well, who's been covered at centre half and left back, but I wouldn't put any money on him sustaining first team tilt. Yeah, Bayer would be me option there. Further forward, they've signed about 10 players or something, and a lot of them are out wide. Redmond's come aboard, Larson as well, the loan signing. I think he's a backup to the left flank. Townsend they're meant to be in for as well. He's been on trial this summer. He's the trialist you've seen in a lot of the reports. That's Andros Townsend.
Nice.
They've got Manuel Benson as well, who got so many goals last season. He just hasn't been seen in pre-season yet. He's apparently carrying a bit of injury, but I think he's back in training now. We just haven't seen him yet. Nathan Tiller, of course, now back at Southampton. I suppose up top as well as a slight bit of intrigue for people playing 3-5-2 or 4-5-1, and that they've got a potential for a very, very cheap starting forward. Rodriguez, I think, was the one we thought would maybe start the season, but he's 34, I think, or coming up to 34, and he was always going to be in and out the side, I think. But he hasn't been seen recently. Veghorst, I think, will be on his way. Obafemi's injured and was peripheral anyway when he joined. Foster is the name you mentioned before. Now, he didn't really hit the ground running when he came to Burnley in January. Quite a lot of outlay on him in terms of money as well. But we hadn't really seen a lot of him to suggest that he would be a fixture in this team. But then again, maybe his skill set, pacey, sort of rapid on the counter, is better suited to the Premier League. Now, Burnley were not a counter-attacking team last season. They were keep ball. They were Man City, possession-based, and maybe you'll get more joy in the Premier League when Burnley get a bit more space behind defences. He's only 5 million. He's not a prolific goal scorer from his career record, and Burnley may still end up signing somebody else. I think they went for Che Adams as well. But he impressed in the pre-season friendly against Benfica, I believe it was, and he's looked all right pre-season. So he's one to watch. Obviously, you wouldn't start with him in your squad. Burnley have got a blank game with 2 for starters, but one for the long-term watch list just to see what he's capable of, and obviously we'll see who else Burnley bring in for the deadline, because they are signing players at a hell of a rate.
Yeah,
there's quite a lot of uncertainty with Burnley at the moment. Not just with new signings, but with existing players and what combination company pick, because he does fancy himself, I think, as a bit of a pep.
Well, you can't blame him in many ways. He's had a front row seat to it, hasn't he? But I suppose long term makes total sense, because they should have a double game week at some point. So by the time they get that, we might have more of an idea. As you say, been signing lots of players. They've got Benson. I'm waiting for them to sign Hedges, and then of course they might well have signed 20 players. But I'll shut up. I'll shut up, and we'll move on to Chelsea to stop me making Mike Bassett puns. But yeah, so Chelsea probably. I don't think I was expecting so much interest in them for Game Week 1. I thought people would be a bit too not sure, and then maybe jump on in Game Week 3. But we've seen Chilwell in lots of drafts now. Jackson very much benefiting from the injuries to Nkunku and Jesus. But I suppose maybe let's start there with Nkunku, because he hasn't missed a game. So he came off, didn't he? And then has been talked about as having some kind of injury. Do we know any more there? And then I guess there's the wider question of how do we expect Chelsea to line up, and do you think that they're going to be in good nick for Game Week 1?
Yeah, Nkunku, it doesn't sound as serious as Jesus, but saying that, it was just standard post-match interview quotes, really. All Pochettino said that was they need a few days to assess him. They hope it's nothing big, but obviously hope it's not a prognosis. It's just a wish. He felt something in his knee. That's why he came off in that game against Monaco. Dortmund, sorry. Dortmund. That was meant to be Chelsea's final pre-season friendly. They're the only team who don't have a game this weekend, at least a game listed. Now, what they might do still is arrange a pre-season game at Cobham. They've done that in the past. But they have ended their official pre-season programme now, as of Thursday. And we got a really good line from Poch as well. He said, almost Bielsa-esque, gave the game away for Game Week 1. He says, this 5th game, which was the Dortmund game, 5th pre-season friendly, was to test the team that he wants. A plan, and he said to give 90 minutes to some players. It's only 10 days till Game Week 1. So he seemed to be suggesting that the bulk of that team, if not all of it, would start against Liverpool. And that was Kepa in goal, and James, Thiago, Colwell, Chilwell at the back, with Gallagher supporting Enzo in midfield. Sterling was on the right in this one. Chukwuemeka, who's 4.5 midfielder, playing as a number 10, and then Nkunku was off the left, but then got injured, and Mudryk came on, and then it was Jackson up top. So I think you'll see the majority of that team starting Game Week 1, but based on what Poch had said, they haven't really got that much in reserve anyway. They've sold off the place. Pretty much the entire midfield is gone now. And Nkunku's fitness is the main question mark over that particular lineup. He's not in that lineup at the moment, just purely because he's the doubt. But if he is past fit, then he comes straight back in, either at the expense of Mudryk or indeed Jackson, who he will start with Nkunku in some games, but not all games. I think Nkunku's versatility means he's going to get more game time, I think, just in general, because he can play left, right, number 10, centre forward. So he's your minutes bet. But Jackson does look pretty good. I've seen a lot of him in pre-season, and it's very impressive. Again, what you'd say about Jackson is I think they're possibly in the market for another forward as well, and we've got another month before the end of the deadline, so the transfer deadline. So that could hinder Jackson's minutes, but promising start in pre-season.
He's definitely got a good attitude on him as well. I saw the clip of him turning around after he scored and said to Maatsen, like, trust me more. Love that attitude in a centre forward. It's really cool to see. So I think they'll be. I'm going to own him at some point this season, I imagine. And it's nice to hear Pochettino being more unequivocal than managers usually are, because there has been a bit of concern around the fullbacks, or had been some concern around the fullbacks in terms of who was going to play regularly. Have you seen anything in pre-season to suggest that we still have to worry about Davis, Trippier, Walker-esque rotations like we used to have with Poch back in the Spurs heydays, or do you reckon people can be fairly confident in James and Chilwell?
There is a possibility of that. I think it's less to do about rotation now, because Chelsea aren't in Europe, so they're not playing twice a week, which was the case with Spurs. When they had the dual fronts to compete on, and that was part of the reason why fullbacks were rotated. This year, of course, Chelsea's not just playing once a week until we get to December. I think with the first midweek game week, there is still a chance he could chop and change now and again. I think depending on the opposition. So we've only seen one preseason game with James and Chilwell in. Before that, he was effectively playing a bit like Villa, so like a more defensive fullback, and then whoever was on the other side, like Chilwell started, there'd be, I think Gusto was playing on the right and was not getting forward as much. If James started, it was Cucurella at left back and Cucurella was hanging back. So you might play that lopsided setup in some games. Maybe fancies a bit more defensive security. Not that Cucurella's any great shakes, but the fixtures are really good early on against teams you'd expect them to beat. So you're going to see Chilwell and James starting most weeks, fitness permitting.
Yeah,
of course, which is always the caveat with James, especially.
That's very true. You probably know Reece James's medical history better than the average man, based on how often you've had to write about it or talk about it.
Yeah, mind you, Chilwell's not much better. I think the difference with Chilwell was he had that long layoff, didn't he? Whereas James seems to get like sort of niggly ones. He just seems to keep getting little things and rules him out for a couple of weeks, and then he's back and then he's ruled out again. Chilwell had that lengthy layoff, didn't he? Was it his knee? But has looked the pick of the two in pre-season, I would have to say.
Yeah, he's certainly the favourite from an FPL perspective at the moment, and we think we're in a fairly confident place on Chelsea. It really will just be all eyes peeled and ears to the ground on that press conference with Pochettino next Friday, which of course you can get updates from Neale himself on the team news video next Friday. Pochettino permitting, we should say, if he's prepared to be forthcoming on it. So do stay tuned for that. It's one of the many things you're going to want to listen out for. Next week, let's move to a different part of London. Let's go to Crystal Palace now. And to be perfectly honest, I think what I want to ask you about is Ahamada, because he has really propelled himself into the conversation. 4.5 million midfielder. Could he be this season's Andreas Pereira? Because he's playing a lot of games, getting involved in attacking positions, but is he nailed enough? Is he just a starlet playing in pre-season, or is he going to be your first choice guy? What do you think?
Yeah, I do worry about that. I think even the last pre-season friendly, we saw Schlupp playing the front three at the expense of him. So I think it was Schlupp, Edouard, and Ayew starting, or Mateta through the middle. But yeah, there is a concern. He's not a natural in that position anyway. He's only really starting there because Alicia is out, and of course Zaha's now left the club as well. So I'd be concerned, particularly as in that Sevilla game, which was on the 31st, I think. Hodgson didn't make any substitutions. He played what looked like his first 11, and gave them all 90 minutes. So he was building all their fitnesses up. So it was Schlupp, Edouard, and Ayew in the front three. Ahamada has impressed. He's got a lot of minutes under his belt, but Alicia's, will be back at some point in the autumn, and will come in for him on that right regardless. So definitely not a long-term option, I don't think, unless he starts threatening to play in midfield. But again, they've got Lerma, they've got Doucouré, Eze, who's star of the show at the moment. That looks like a fairly first choice midfield. They didn't have Mitchell in the last pre-season friendly, but I've seen reports that they're confident of him being back in training this week. So he would obviously take the place of Klein, who's not a natural left back. And the rest of the team, it looks fairly recognisable from last season.
Yeah. think they're in a good place. I think Palace are going to do quite well this year. And you actually read my mind. My next question was going to be about Tyreek Mitchell because, harking back to that Aston Villa Crystal Palace rotation, it was Mitchell who I'd chosen as my candidate. Do you see him as one worth investing in that rotation? He's not exactly a meta pick in lots of ways, but in terms of people who are nailed on in the back four at Palace, I mean, there's some people go for Johnston, but if you're looking for someone in the back four, is there anyone who stands out as being super nailed on in your mind?
I've always gone for Anderson. I think the two centre halves are more nailed than the fullbacks. And Mitchell's going to play the majority of games, but there is occasion where he drops out and they play like Ward and Klein. I think that was more fitness related in the last season. I think he had some kind of underlying thing, and he didn't seem fully fit on a number of occasions. But I would go with Anderson anyway. I think because he's got the bit of goal threat from corners, not tons of it, and the occasional assist as well. He's got that raking pass on him. His distribution's excellent, and to be honest, I wouldn't be even sure he's going to be at Palace by the end of August because I think some clubs are circling. I think he made my 4.5 defenders article over Mitchell, so that's who I would side with if I was going Palace. And to be fair, Palace, I mean, their defensive record last season, you might not see it from the goals conceded, but the expected goals conceded, I think they're the fourth best in the division.
It was really good.
They were really good on the underlying number. So I think the people are sleeping on them a bit, especially Johnson and especially Anderson. Obviously, not going to be in your first three defenders. You got your Stupinan, Gabriel, Chilwell, or Trent, and Stones as well. But then as a fourth or fifth, then you can get them in a bit of a rotation, as you said with Villa there. Not the worst because I think Sheffield United are in such disarray at the moment. That's the Gameweek 1 position. You've got Wolves at home, Gameweek 4, who are they're in dire straits. Forest in Gameweek 8 at home, the worst travellers last season as well. So there's a few games there in the opening 8 game weeks where you look at possible returns.
Yeah. The only downside I think about Anderson is that there's nothing in his name that you can make as any kind of pun to do with Beckenbauer, because he effectively, that is who he is. He's a modern version of him.
Yeah.
He's a Rolls Royce, if we're going to use a sort of
he is
cliche in football.
He certainly is. Yeah, he's and as I said, I think there's a few sniff around him. I think Newcastle even looked at him briefly, but I think maybe out of our price range. But yeah, I really rate him. Looks really good.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that could be useful for people looking for that Palace defender, as we said. Let's have a look at Everton now, where, I mean, I say strangely, maybe not. Sean Dyche is the manager. And Tarkowski today officially handed the number 6 after wearing, I think, the number 2. So, they're getting their ducks in order at Everton, and there's a bit of interest in their defensive assets. Patterson, famously in a lot of teams, and then not in a lot of teams when he was injured for a while. Tarkowski's in a few teams, Pickford's in a few others. Probably more interest here in the defence than attack. But it's intriguing to see who is available up front because you've actually got Dan Juma as the centre forward who's listed as a midfielder. But of course, it was all provisional, so not to put any pressure on you. But any nuggets here for Everton?
Yeah, as I said, I did a team preview yesterday of Everton, and in the lineup section mentioned the fact that fitness is going to be a key factor in that lineup in Game Week 1. At different ends of the scale because you've got a couple of players returning. Calvert-Lewin and Mikalenko both played in that behind closed doors game on Tuesday against Monza. Got 45 minutes apiece now. Whether that's going to be enough, obviously they've got this weekend as well as a friendly. Whether they're going to be match fit enough to play in Game Week 1, I've erred on the side of caution with the lineup and said they're not, but that could change by next Friday. The other big one is McNeil, and there's real concerns that he took a knock to the knee last weekend and hobbled off, and there's concerns that it's actually more than a knock. We haven't heard anything official yet, but there's worries that he's going to be out a little while. Hopefully that's not the case, and Dyche brings us good news. But again, I've gone glass half full with predict the lineup, and that's the provisional one anyway, and that's with without any of the 3 players I've mentioned. In which case, you could have Danjuma leading the line, which he did against Stoke in the pre-season friendly. He was out of position there. Ashley Young's played out of position as well on the left wing. In one of the friendlies, he's been at left back mostly, but could push further up the flank if McNeil's out. In which case, you could have someone like Godfrey at left back. And then, Mikalenko was the other one. Yeah, so if he's not fit, then Young or Godfrey at left back. I would say apart from that, it's mostly settled. There's a chance that Garner could get crashed central midfield. There's a chance that Brentford could come into the equation as well. He's 4 million defender. Now, he was on loan at PSV last season, had a successful loan spell. So Dice hasn't really had him to pick until this point. And he came back late from the Euro under-21s as well. So he's played, I think, 2 pre-season friendlies, came on for Keane in one of them, and then played in the behind closed doors game against Monza on Tuesday. So again, I think this weekend is going to be key to seeing who that partner for Tarkowski is, because Tarkowski is the Neale centre half, and then Dice hasn't really been able to name a settled player alongside him. We had Keane there, we had Cody, who's now gone. Of course, he was on loan. He was never really suited to a back four anyway. Mina, latterly, but he's now gone. He was released on a free this summer. So there's a place to be claimed there for anyone who wants it. Keane probably the marginal favourite at the moment, but Brentford's one for your watch list, because could have a 4 million route into that Everton defence if Dyche fancies him, and that's a big if.
Yeah. You have to work very hard to get into Dyche's good books. He's a no nonsense manager, or a proper manager, as some people refer to him as, just because he's just more English than other people. I think that's the metric there. Interesting that you mentioned how unsettled, in inverted commas, they've been in pre-season, because I think the sort of predisposition from a lot of people is to assume that Dyche has come in and the full pre-season is going to be able to drill the players and get them into Dyche mode. But he famously is someone who really hates rotation, and he likes to know what his first choice 11 is. There's possible disadvantage for him if he's not been able to have that. Does that make them not quite as Dyche ready as maybe they might like? I don't know, because there's just a few people interested in the Everton defence just based purely on Dyche, which makes a lot of sense. But if he's not had the chance to get his first team playing 2-3 times in pre-season, does that perhaps count against their ability to deliver defensively?
I don't think it's been that bad, really, to be honest. I think it's the injuries I mentioned. I mean, they've been without. I mean, you could argue that Mikalenko is not part of that first choice back four anyway. There's only really Calvert-Lewin to come into that side. Coleman, they've been without as well. But Patterson, Tarkowski, and Young, are the basis of a decent defence. Pickford behind them, he's been playing. He's had the Decore, Gay, and Anana available as well in front of them. So, and Iwobi and McNeil's been fit for most of the season. Of course, McNeil's injured now. He's not been too unsettled. It's just those probably late calls that he's got next week when we get those injury updates. I'm still tempted myself. I did it again. Look at the fixtures, and it seems like a mixed bag. But if you're just using Tarkowski or Pickford now and again, just for those appealing home games, then you've got a string of really good fixtures on Goodison. Fulham in game week 1, Wolves in game week 3, Luton in game week 7, Bournemouth in game week 8. So if Tarkowski or Pickford is, Tarkowski your fifth defender, if Pickford's your a rotating goalkeeper, or even just your normal goalkeeper, then there are some decent clean sheet opportunities. Sheffield United away as well, game week 4, in the first 8 game weeks. So I'm still tempted by I think, given the dearth of a standard option at 4.5 amongst the goalkeepers, Pickford's definitely on my long list. And Tarkowski, again, who I mentioned in this article yesterday, since Dyche came in, he's had, I think, the second most shots in the box amongst defenders in the Premier League, because of that reliance on set plays. That's really shot up since Dyche came in, as you would expect. So Tarkowski's one on my defenders long list as well. I wouldn't be surprised if I go into the game week 1 with one of those 2 players.
Yeah, they certainly could have uses sporadically as and when you need them, which is really the brief of a budget defender, isn't it? So we'll see how we go there. You mentioned, of course, they are playing Fulham in game week 1, so let's have a quick look at them. Minus Mitrovic in your predicted lineup for obvious reasons. And yeah, interesting in many ways. Not that much interest in them FPL wise this season, other than maybe Leno. Maybe interested in some rotation there, perhaps.
Yeah, Leno. I think Leno's fixtures rotate quite well with. Is it Everton's? I did not one rotation, and Fulham's do rotate quite well. I think it's with Everton's. Certainly in the first 8. Not bad actually, that rotation. You avoid any of the big 6 in the first 8 game weeks, and you get 4 meetings with Luton and Sheffield United, which is pretty good. Leno, of course, was basically keeping Fulham in it at times last season, wasn't he? His XGP was high. He was racking up loads of save points. I don't think their defence is really that strong. And of course, they've had a bit of a disruptive pre-season as well. They've been without Ream, who's I think it's still his broken arm. That's why he's been missing. Tosin's been linked with a move away. And so they've got Bassi who's come in from Ajax, and they've had a young lad who I must admit I'm not really aware of. French sounding name, I can't remember his name, but he's been playing in pre-season. They've also lost Paulinho, who's as important, I think, at the back as Leno. You know, that defensive cover in midfield. I think he's dislocated his shoulder, and looks like he's out of game week 1. What that does mean is that you've possibly got a 4.5 star midfielder in Lukic playing alongside Reid, and they've also lost Mitrovic as well. Well, not officially, he's still officially a Fulham player, but the thinking is that he's off to Saudi Arabia. So really, the spine of that team, they've got arguably the best centre half in Tosin, possibly on his way. Palini is injured. Mitrovic, first choice centre forward, likely to be going out as well. So I think a weaker team from last season. Pereira's just back from injury. He was out of the end of last season and then first half of pre-season, but he's come back just as Kenny got injured. So he's one to watch because, of course, he might inherit penalties.
Oh, yeah. Which, means that Fulham might actually score some now. Mitrovic not taking them anymore. So, yeah. That's quite useful not to have to rely on Mitrovic for penalties anymore. That is for sure. It's almost like a bad thing when they get a penalty. Not so much anymore. But yeah, as I said, there's I think it's probably going to be more interesting people perhaps maybe targeting Fulham on the fixture ticker rather than necessarily targeting them for their individual players, perhaps when you talk about that context there. So let's move on to a more sought-after team. And alphabetically next, of course, is Liverpool, where there are some questions among people about who is going to be in the front three with Salah. And that's probably the main thing, isn't it? Because behind that, the key FPL assets, we know what we're getting from them. Trent is probably going to play in that new role when they're in possession, play defensively as a right back. Robertson probably in a back three, so hard to consider him. And it's really the front three that perhaps the question is. It's Diaz, Gakpo, Jota, Nunez, sort of raffle or 50-50 dice roll, whatever you want to call it. That's what people are interested in. Where do you stand on what we see, what we might see there?
Yeah, the lineup they named against Bayern did have a bit of a first team feel of it, didn't it? When you saw it, with the exception of Konate coming in for Matip, I think that's what you see. Matip didn't do himself any favors with the performance, but the rest of the team looked fairly first choice, didn't it? I think the left wings are the most up for grabs, I think, because you got Diaz, who's had a strong pre-season, and Jota, of course, as well. I still think Darwin's lagging behind Gakpo up top. As good as he's been in pre-season and he scored goals, there's constant quotes coming out from Klopp about the route into this team being defensive work from top, the pressing, the off the ball contributions, which Darwin's really, it's not his forte, is it? It makes you wonder why they signed him in the first place. But Gakpo brings you all that. He's sort of in that Firmino mold, and I wouldn't be surprised if Darwin's back on the bench again coming game week 1, as strong as he's been in pre-season. And it's Gakpo leading the line, certainly against a team like Chelsea maybe. Time will tell. We've got another pre-season game to go on. I think it's Monday actually. They're playing Darmstadt at Deepdale in Preston. I don't know what's going on there. Why are they playing there?
Yeah, it's the most bewildering pre-season friendly I think of the whole campaign, isn't it? For every team. Like, why is it at Preston?
There's been some strange ones, like somebody playing at Colchester, and Wolves. Somebody played yesterday. Forest played at St George's Park. So yeah, there's been some odd ones. But yes, I think you can be fairly confident most of that lineup. McAllister, we're waiting on further news of him, but it sounds innocuous. I think Klopp even said he could have continued after that knock to his knee against Bayern. So obviously he's going to be a feature of that midfield, along with the new lad whose name I've been practicing, but I still yet to master. Szoboszlai.
Hey, I think you did. No, I think you got it. Yeah, or we could just call him Dominic. Dick and Dom.
Yeah, Dominic. Dick and Dom. Yeah, Mac and Dom in midfield. Jones has been playing as the 6 in the last couple of games, after the departure of Fabinho, Henderson, Milner. All those players have played as sixes in previous years. They're all gone now. And Curtis Jones, as I say, has been playing as that number 6, so not an ideal solution, but that's the best of what they've got at the moment, especially with Bajcetic as well on the way back from injury. He's in training, I think, now, so he could be coming in for a start soon. I would expect them to sign a number 6 as well, I think. Apart from that, yeah, as you say, it's fairly straightforward. Alisson, Van Dijk, Trent, Robertson, McAllister, Salah, of course, the only nails into that attack for most of the season. And it's I would say it's the left wing spot where there's some debate.
Interestingly enough, it turns out I didn't know this. Apparently, that game was played at Deepdale. People saying in the comments because there's construction work still ongoing at Anfield relating to the away end. So that's presumably why.
That'll be it.
And speaking of teams in that predicament, doing work to their stadium,
yeah.
Let's talk about Luton, who I think at the moment there's lots of things in flux on the Fantasy Football Square website. So we don't have the little orange circles of their names yet, but we've got the text of their names. So and more 4 million defenders here, which is exciting.
Yeah, that seems like such an easy job, doesn't it? But that's it's lingering on that job in the tech department. Yes, so a lot of 4 million. I think we had 3 of them starting on, when was it, Wednesday or Thursday? They were playing Luton. They were playing Wolves, and they kept the clean sheet as well. So we know that Anderson and Lockyer. So Lockyer's 4.5. Anderson and Bale are probably the most nailed at the moment. Anderson has looked very good pre-season as well, and are your best bets at the moment. They've also got Kabore as well, who's signed from Man City. He's 4 million. He's a wing back, so will get you more attacking return. Do you think? The only problem there is, of course, they've got. I guess they've got a bit of competition. They've got Ogbene, who's ostensibly a forward or a winger, but he has played at right wing back in the pre-season as well, and came on for Kabore the other night. You've also got Giles on the other side, competing with Doherty. Now, I must admit, I'll have to do some research into this next week, or maybe one of those could deputise on the other flank as well. But I will look into that. Certainly, I think if you're going for someone on your bench who you want minutes from as an emergency, then I would probably go with Anderson at the moment. Because I think he's the big money signing from the summer, if you can call that big money, a couple of million from Barnsley. And I'd side with him. But of course, they're also blank in game week 2 as well. So you if you need anybody in game week 2 off your bench as a defender, then it's not going to be a Luton asset. The rest of that team, Mpanzu and Kamba Chong have started, I think, the last 2 together. So that is looking like the midfield 3. The Kamba, 4.5 million midfielder. Again, one of your go-tos, I think. Probably the go-to at the moment if you just want minutes, because he isn't going to get you much else. I think I did a few articles on budget midfielders and on Luton. And his rate of shot last season and rate of chance created was worse than the 3 Luton centre-halves. So he just sits there basically in front of the back four and indeed drops into that defence. He's a holder midfielder. He just does the dirty work. But he's going to be starting, I think, pretty much every week. So if all you want is minutes as an emergency substitute, then Nakamba is your man.
Yeah.
Up top, it's the 2 who were leading the line last season, Adebayo and Morris, who's definitely the more attractive of the 2. Has been on pens in pre-season, took the last penalty in the Championship as well, after Adebayo and Woodrow missed. And has scored, I think, 3 goals in pre-season as well. So he's a little bit more expensive. He's 5.5, but I would think you get more goals than any of the other forwards in that Luton squad.
Yeah, Nakamba's the only one I've had in my squad really over this summer. Other than I had Bell initially at the beginning, but then I actually had to have money to spend, so I kind of upgraded my defenders a little bit. But if I need 4 million at some point, probably go for Kabore. Just on the law of averages, as you say, he's more likely to be involved in attacking returns than the other 2. And I suppose the only other observation I have is that if you thought Alexis McAllister was a name that felt like a mishmash of lots of different things, just wait until you get acquainted with Pelly, Ruddock, and Panzu. What a name! It's a fantastic name. So I'm looking forward to Match of the Day commentators saying that one this season. So yeah,
he's come up from all the way from the conference, hasn't he? He's come all the way up from the National League with Luton. So that's a nice little story there. In the Premier League next season. Yeah. One other line on Luton, which isn't reflected in this graphic, they've just signed a new goalkeeper from Blackburn, I think yesterday or this morning. So he will take the place of, who have I got in the moment? Is it Shea or Walton?
It's Shea at the moment.
Yeah.
But it was very much a sort of, you weren't sure, was it? Because Horvath was there last year.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
So it was a placeholder until this signing now, isn't it? So
exactly.
Yeah.
I'm sure he'll come in at 4.5.
Yeah, which actually might be all right for. We talked about Everton rotation. Everton and Luton's fixtures do rotate relatively nicely. Less so, I think, after that blank game week. But a 4.5 million Luton goalkeeper is hardly. You can't go wrong with that. Really, having that in the game is useful.
He has indeed actually already been priced up. They were very, very quick on off the mark with that.
Nice.
So yeah, he's 4.5.
Well done, FPL.
Kaminsky.
Nice. Well, let's move on to Man City now. They are next, and in a way, okay, here's a question for you. Which one makes you shiver more right now, Brighton or Man City? Because I wonder if it's close, or maybe Brighton might be worse.
Probably Brighton at the moment. I think with City, the outgoings have kind of made the job a bit easier. So obviously Mahrez has gone. Who else has gone? Someone else notable. Oh, Gundogan.
Gundogan, yeah.
Of course. Yeah. So two men down from last season. They brought in Kovacic, who I think's going to be horses for courses selection. I think you might see him in the Community Shield, for example, this weekend, and in the trickier matches. Walker leaving would make my job easier as well in the back line. I'm not sure what the lineup is you've got on the screen at the moment. I updated it this morning. Walker's in there now with Akanji, just because Ake's had an injury and he was back on the bench last time, but he didn't play. And De Bruyne has been on the bench last pre-season friendlies and hasn't played at all as well. So I don't know why he just keeps putting injured players on the bench or not fully match fit players on the bench and they're not using him. So I've just erred on the side of caution there. Ake might be fit this weekend and playing the Community Shield, in which case straight back in the lineup. So yeah, I think I'm fairly confident with most of this team. I'd be surprised if De Bruyne gets meaningful game time this weekend, like say 70, 80 minutes, then he comes into the thinking maybe for game week 1. But at the moment, Alvarez has had a full pre-season and can play that, that number 8, number 10 advanced role behind Haaland, and I wouldn't be surprised if he does that, especially against a team like Burnley as well, who are they're not the Dice team of previous years, but this is the type of game where Pep likes his runners from midfield, as he calls them, or he's people get into the box. Gundogan was one of those. Foden's another one, and we've seen Foden playing very central in pre-season, whether that's been from that one of those number 8, number 10 roles, or as happened in the last game, where he started on the right, but was just drifting into that central area, and he had Walker of all people. He was not an attacking right back, just bombing up and down that right flank, getting forward. If only they had someone like that in the squad who could play that role, i.e. Cancelo. He was, I don't know if he's still surplus to requirements, but we'll see what he does with him. But yeah, I'll be fairly confident. I think the main question marks are at the defence at the moment, because you've got Ake's fitness, which is still a slight doubt. We'll hopefully hear more on that front. And you've also got Kanji. Cancelo is still there. Laporte's still there. Both thought to be surplus to requirements, but still there. Both have played a part in pre-season. So we'll see what happens. Of course, they are circling around Gvardiol as well, aren't they?
It looks like actually he's having his medical right now, was what I saw.
Is he really?
Yeah, Guardiola came into a press conference and was like, he's actually having his medical right now. Like, pretty much verbatim.
Fresh off the press.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there you go.
God on Guardiola for actually revealing something for once. And he was very happy with his surname as well. He said he's got a nice surname.
It's basically he's signed himself. And as we've seen in previous years, he's not afraid to put in a centre half straight away. We saw it with Diaz, didn't we? And we saw it with I think Diaz signed on the Thursday and then was immediately in the team 2 days later. So another name was going to muddy the waters at the back. So yeah, that'll be worth paying attention to in the next week. So yeah, that back line is the trickiest one, I think, at the moment. Stones inverting in midfield has been a common feature of pre-season and towards the end of last season, of course, as well. So he'd be my go-to pick at the moment, along with Diaz probably as well.
Yeah.
But
that's the thing.
Once the Champions League starts, then the rotation is going to kick in earnest.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are thinking Stones is the way to go. But, well, firstly, not actually a defender in the traditional sense anymore. He's more of a, he's a ball-playing asset these days. Has arguably made himself kind of indispensable to the team, really. Whereas he can cycle through centre-backs in those centre-backs positions with
Yeah.
slightly more impunity, I suppose. So, I mean, can you see Kovacic involved in the Stones position this season? Do you think that would muddy there, or is that too deep for Kovacic? Would he play slightly further
Yeah.
forward?
He could cover for Rodri. I think Pep said that he could now and again he could play as the other six. The one who isn't inverting from either centre half or right back, which Stones is doing. More often, I think you're going to see him as one of the eights. Maybe in the games where trickier games like Liverpool, Arsenal, teams like that, where you want someone who's resistant press. Press resistant. Um, he definitely could play a role in those type of games, but I don't think you're not going to see him. Certainly not challenging Stones' position. Occasionally covering for Rodri, perhaps. The worry is, of course, Pep just reinvents his tactics again. Doesn't play with inverted fullbacks. He thinks he's getting too mainstream, and everyone's copying him now. And he decides to do what he did in that buying game of putting Walker bombing forward from right back. Stones not getting forward as much at midfield. So yeah, tactically he's a slippery eel as Pep. Keep an eye on what he's doing in the Community Shield.
He does like to reinvent things and be the first one to do it. So
He does.
who knows? Who knows? Well, let's swap to the other side of Manchester now, and there are interestingly similar-ish questions around some positions, sort of in defence. Wan-Bissaka is currently in the predicted lineup, which is nice, 4.5 million. Dalot is his positional rival, but
Yeah.
do you feel that there's a clear-cut winner in that yet, or not? And then I suppose other people may wonder about Højlund, where he's going to come in, what that's going to mean for the team in terms of Rashford, and what. I mean, a lot of it depends on when he arrives, but I think probably more questions over defence would be my guess.
Yeah, medium long term, I think this is you couldn't call it. I think Wan-Bissaka was definitely in the line for Gameweek 1. He's had the stronger pre-season, has played in that first choice backline in those warm-up games. Darlow played in the most recent one against. Let me bring up my tracker again. It was against Dortmund, but that was a understrength team. We had particularly like Brandon Williams starting. You had McTominay, Van der Beek were part of that team, and Darlow was part of that team as well. So that was definitely a second string team. Whereas Wan-Bissaka started against Madrid, I think Arsenal as well. So he looks like the first choice for the start of the season, but longer term, I think there will be times when Darlow comes in. So if you want someone a bit more secure, then obviously Shaw on the opposite flank. But he's now 5.5, of course, and that's why a lot of people are flocking to Onana between the posts. Probably mostly settled, I think, this team in terms of predicted for Gameweek 1. Mount's been playing deeper than Fernandes in pre-season. Sancho has been kind of moonlighting as a striker now and again, rather than Rashford, funnily enough. And that still could be the place come game in. Obviously, Højlund's going to come in, so that's longer term, or even in the shorter term. He's going to be starting more games than not, you think. But I don't think there's many questions apart from that with United at the moment. Kobe Mainoo had a really good pre-season, but has got injured now and is going to miss Gameweek 1. So that's him. His chances gone, I think, for now. Martial hasn't played any part in pre-season. Neither has Malacia. So probably not many question marks for Gameweek 1, really.
Yeah, actually, that is useful. Certainly, fewer question marks on the other side of the city. Let's move away from all these rubbish teams. We've talked about some really terrible teams up until now. Alphabetically, we're now on to the cream of the crop, if you ask Neil. Let's have a look at some Champions League teams. We've already looked at some already, but just wanted to build up this moment for you, Neil. The Newcastle are back in the Champions League. Got a good squad. A little bit of rotation questions in a couple of key positions, really. And so Isak versus Wilson is something people are wondering about, for example. Anderson as well has done very well in pre-season, and there's a lot of people just flocking to him. So they're probably the two biggest questions I've got for you, both professionally and personally as a fan as well. Yeah,
it's I do think this is going to be a difficult second season to an extent. I think with Champions League starting, I am excited about being in Europe again, but domestically, I think it will have an impact, and certainly in FPL terms as well. Obviously that doesn't start till after Gameweek 5. But even Gameweek 1, there's a few question marks. I think the goalkeeper and back forward start with the easy things. That's fairly settled, so long as Share's minor tweak in the last pre-season friendly was out. Doesn't seem to be much. They're hoping he's going to be fine. I think because Longstaff and Willock are still working their way back from injury, they've both had hamstring problems. So I think it is 4 into 3 in midfield. Bruno, you think, would start. Joelinton starts. Anderson's best chance is probably getting in over Tonali, because Howe has in the past blooded new signings gradually. Certainly was the case with Bruno. Certainly was the case with Gordon as well. Sometimes he hasn't had an option, but a player like Isak came straight into the team, but that was because Wilson was injured. So I think he does like to gradually introduce players. Now, yes, of course, he has had pre-season, so that's slightly different. Tali has had a chance to get game time. But I wouldn't be shocked if Anderson did start this. He's not in my predicted line at the moment, but that is the one spot where I think there is the most up for grabs. And he's had a fantastic summer. 7 attacking returns, I think. I think the main worry would be that we're playing Villa, who are quite high octane and very competent team now. I think if we were at home to someone like, and no offense to anybody from Luton, but Luton or Sheffield United, I think Howard may be countenance playing Anderson more, less defensive work needed. Not that I'm saying Anderson's bad off the ball, but I do wonder whether he would side with seniority and go with Tonali in this one. Up top, a lot of question marks there. Again, medium term, there's going to be rotation, I think. In pre-season, I think the best 3 have looked, and this is just my opinion, Almiron, Isak and Gordon so far. Barnes has just come in, again, based on what I've just said about how Bloodney signings slowly. I think Barnes will start on the bench in Gameweek 1. I think Gordon will be on the left. Almiron probably over Murphy as well. And then Isak I've got over Wilson. Now, people will remember Wilson from that purple patch towards the end of last season and will think he's our number 9. But really, I think let me dredge up these stats from before. But there was only 18 instances last season when Wilson and Isak were available together, and Wilson only started over Isak in 5 of them. So 5 of the 18. 2 of those were off the back of an injury to Isak. He was come back for a long-term injury. 2 of them were the middle fixture in a 3-game week. So this was how he's shuffling his pack. Whereas Isak started 9 times when Wilson was benched. So I still think Howe favours Isak. There will be times when Wilson comes in, definitely, especially when the Champions League starts. And I don't think he might pick one for the Champions League, one for domestic matters, or he might just mix it up. I think at that point I'd be avoiding both of them, to be honest, even though the fixtures get good from Gameweek 5. And of course they have started together on 4 occasions as well last season. But I think those instances are going to be fewer and further between this time because they've got Barnes now. Gordon's he's had excellent pre-season. He's another option there. There is now the 3 games a week schedule with the Champions League, so he will now divide game time between those 2 strikers, Isak and Wilson, rather than them playing both in the same game, as was the case towards the end of last season. So there will be rotation now up top.
Yeah, Wilson in many ways has become your Solskjaer. Like, he was so good as a substitute, because that's the crazy thing. As you say, people will broadly remember all the goals and just assume he was the go-to guy. In fact, we've had a couple of comments in the chat wondering why Wilson's not in your starting lineup, which of course you have addressed very well. And because the other thing, statistically, it was insane as well. I mean, we've been looking at some forward data in the last couple of days, of course, with Jesus getting that injury, looking at similarly priced forwards. And the data that Wilson was putting up in the last 12 game weeks of the season, it was like top 3 for things like shots on target, XGI, shots in the box, big chances. But he was doing all of that as a substitute. This is the only weird thing, is him not necessarily starting games didn't necessarily make him worse, but I suppose that's probably a difficult sort of dynamic to sustain, to make a career out of being a super sub. We can only really point to Solskjaer as someone who's successfully done that long term in the past. And Wilson may not want to do that. Wilson may want to knock on the door to start games as well. So it's a tricky part of the team to invest in, isn't it? Yeah,
I'm personally, I mean, the fixtures make it easier to avoid them anyway. From games 1 to 4, the fixtures are really bad. So I think it's just a watch and wait for this, just to see how handle those the condensed schedule, whether one is starting in Europe or not. You may get an injury to one of them as well. One of them may get injured, in which case the other one becomes a lot more attractive, because we haven't really got a third striker. That will probably be Gordon. I think will be the third option, because we saw that in one of the pre-season friendlies, Isak and Gordon swapping positions, Belly Martinelli and Trossard, and Gordon going through the middle. So I think he may be our third striker unless we sign somebody else. So yeah, a lot can happen between now and game week 5.
Yeah, the fixtures for Newcastle look really, really nice actually. After I think game week 4, I think it is.
Yeah.
For in terms of like a prolonged period, like 4 to 10, I think you look really nice. So let's have a look, see how Europe affects you guys, and then go from there. So yeah, we've got a few other teams left to cover, but largely they're ones that people aren't too interested in. So we've got Forest, we've got Sheffield United, we've got Wolves to go through, and there's also Spurs, and to some extent there's some interest in West Ham. So let's reel through Forest. And Sheffield United and Wolves, and then we might finish on Spurs and West Ham. Just get the chaff out of the way. No offence, guys, who support these clubs, but it's looking a bit bleak for all three of them in many ways.
Yeah, was it Forest there? You seem so.
Yeah, let's do Forest first. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's not looking too good. Now this printed lineup, I'll probably disregard this to an extent because they've got a cluster of injury doubts. Awani as well being one of them. Johnson. Nia Carty is not featured for a while in pre-season. Phillippe as well. So they've got problems. They've just shipped 5 to Rennes, I think. They've got a new goalkeeper coming in as well. So I think Horvath's between the posts at the moment in this pre-season lineup. But they are looking for is it Turner from Arsenal who they're seemingly circling around? Who's a 4 million goalkeeper. Keep your eyes on that. Maybe that will signal the end of their pursuit for Henderson, but that remains to be seen. Yeah. It's a lineup that a bit like Frank at Forest at Brentford. Cooper playing with the wing backs in the trickier games. He did this against Arsenal actually when they beat them towards the end of the season. And when they've got more winnable fixtures, he will go towards a 4-3-3. And it is Arsenal in game week 1, so I fully expect them to play with 3 centre halves. And yeah, any questions?
I want to say no because I'm personally not interested, but a couple of people are talking about Morgan Gibbs-White, so I guess I professionally have to ask you about him.
Yeah, Gibbs-White's back fit. He was part of that England under-21 squad, so he had a delayed return to pre-season, but he's now back and playing, and he's the go-to option from Forest. Not least because he's probably on pens now as well. Johnson started last season on penalties, I think missed twice, is that right? And then Gibbs-White's taken the last 2 and scored them both. And not only that, he's on corners, he's on free kicks, he's created from open players good as well. He got, what was it, a dozen assists last season? Yeah, it was. A tally that wasn't beaten by many players. 5 goals as well. I think he can probably improve on that. Players is one of the more advanced central midfielders behind Awani when he's fit, or out wide in a 4-3-3 as well. So definitely the go-to Forest guy. Now, Danilo's one to watch as well, 5.5, but for 0.5 million more, you're getting penalties and free kicks and corners. I would just avoid the defence to start with. And I mean, to be honest, their fixtures are awful mostly in the first 7 game weeks. They got Arsenal, Man United, and Man City all away, and Chelsea all away, and then Brentford at home. They have got Sheffield United at home. They have got Burnley at home in game weeks 2 and 5. But Gibbs-White's probably not at a cost where you can bench him. He 6 million?
Yeah, 6 million.
That's not bench fodder, is it really?
Yeah.
Not when Matoma and Bomo and Diaby are all just 500,000 more. When the fixtures get better, which is much later, I think game week maybe 14 to 18, then maybe at that point Gibbs-White comes into the equation. But I think most people are starting the season without Forest.
Or perhaps maybe game week 1 of next season when you can invest in them in the championship game. I'm joking. That's probably I'm going to get. I shouldn't have said that. I'm going to get people attacking me on Twitter now. But speaking of the championship, let's talk about a team that just came up from it, and that is Sheffield United. Many people will know, of course, that I do love a good 4 million defender from this club, and there's a couple now. Baldock, the main one.
Yes, and it looks good for a start because Bogle's injured at the moment. He's going to miss the first couple of weeks, and he is one of his positional rivals. They've just signed someone with a very trusty left foot, and that is Trusty from Arsenal, who's a 4 million defender. So I think he will threaten Robinson's start, if I'm reading that right. Correct me if I'm wrong, Sheffield United fans, but I believe that's where he plays. So I don't know if he might be frustrating at 11, but yeah, Baldock at first, who's going to give you that extra attacking threat from wing back. Longer term, when Bogle's fit, then you might see a slight bit of rotation, but maybe initially people are content just to go with Baldock. They are very thin on numbers further forward. They've got injuries. They've got Flex injured in midfield, but he wasn't a regular star anyway last season. They've lost McAtee and Doyle, who were low knees from Man City. They've gone back to their parent clubs. Norwood had a pre-season head injury. Again, he was mostly back up towards the end of last season, but might be forced to start the season playing with him. It's up top though where there's real problems. Now I don't know which lineup you've got there that I've predicted, but
Right,
I updated this recently.
McBurney.
Yeah, well, Ndai's off to Marseille, so McBurney's been injured in pre-season. Brewster's been out. Jefferson as well has been out. They've got an absolute cluster of problems up top. McBurney, they're hopeful of getting back for game week 1. I think it is just hope rather than anything. So you've faced now with the prospect of Basula, who I must admit that I don't know much about. He was very peripheral last season. He's a 4.5 million forward, but just by the numbers, and I expect to see more flags added on to Sheffield United players in the next week when it becomes clear just how fit everyone is, then he might actually be starting game week 1. They've also got Traore, who they've just signed, but I think he's got visa issues as well. So it's an absolute mess. A mess up top for them. And Palace have got them game week 1. A real good time to play them, Sheffield United, because normally you get that feel good feeling with a newly promoted team, that bounce. And I just the feeling around the club of Sheffield United at the moment. I spoke to FPL Blade with a preview. It's one of pessimism at the moment. That Ndai transfer, which has come out of the blue, has been a real kick in the teeth, and they're in sorry shape really at the moment.
Which, very much just confirms, I think, probably avoiding them, at least to begin with, which may also be the view people take on Wolves. So we'll round off our little triple header there of teams that aren't garnering too much interest, and then we'll look at Spurs and West Ham, where there is a little bit more. I mean, wow. I think Wolves probably having the most pessimistic atmosphere at any Premier League club in the build-up to the new season, right? It's kind of hard for it to get much worse. And of course, talks even that the manager might walk, and we've been in our virtual studio for a little while. He may even have left while we were recording. Who knows? It's that bad, isn't it? So yeah, it's hard to get excited about Wolves.
Yeah, I'm maybe if you're writing the team preview. Actually, funnily enough, I've spoken to FPL Black Wolf, who's a lovely chap, and supplied us with some excellent answers for the fan Q&A. And I think a lot of the hope is on the shoulders of Lopetegui staying this season, because I think if he goes, which he might, and he's threatening to do by the sounds of it, then there's a lot of pessimism around. They have sold a lot of players this summer. They've let players go on free. So Neves and Collins are the big money transfers that have gone. They probably would have gotten rid of a lot of these players anyway, like some Moutinho, Costa, Adama Traore as well. So I think, as I mentioned in the article, the sort of frustration is not the players leaving, because a lot of these would have left. It's the lack of people coming in. So far, they've signed Doherty on a free transfer and a backup goalkeeper on a free transfer. They haven't spent a dime, apart from on the loan, the loan to buy deals that I had pre-existing. So Cunha and Traore, who they had to buy as an obligation. So that hasn't helped with financial fair play. So yeah, they are. Their first 11 still looks decent-ish. Still going to struggle for goals by the looks of it. But beyond that, there's not much strength and depth. So yeah, the lineup I've got here, I think Gomez could come in for Hodge, certainly. And then they've got 2 strikers back. Actually, Silva's come back from a loan spell and looked quite good in pre-season. And the guy whose name I was butchering constantly last season, the Serbian striker, oh Lord, we're gonna have another go at it. Kalajic. He got injured, I think, 45 minutes into his debut last season and missed the entire campaign. He's back as well. So yeah, I've got a bit more firepower, if not Premier League proven quality yet. But there is hope for Fabio Silva. He's looked all right actually in pre-season by the sounds of it.
Yeah, I've heard he done very well the other night. Fans were quite positive reaction to him being involved. Was what I'd seen anyway.
That's exactly right, David. Yeah, I think that was the what Black Wolf was telling me as well. But again, the fixtures: Man United first off, Brighton, Liverpool, Man City, Aston Villa, all before game week 8. You're gonna avoid it. It's the opposite of last year when we were all piling on to Neto, with the fixtures being so good. They're definitely not, which gives us a bit of time to assess them anyway.
Which is very useful. I mean, as you said, the players aren't necessarily bad. It's just we just don't know what to expect when they've lost some key people. They need to rebuild that spine. So wait and see for them. And it's tricky times for them. Let's look at Spurs now, because pretty much the opposite effect. Spurs fans seem happy at the moment, which is strange because I'm not used to my friends who are Spurs fans being as positive as this. But you can't blame them, because things have been difficult for them to be too excited by in recent years. But this new setup with Postecoglou could yield a lot of excitement, a lot of goals. Even possibly if Kane's not there, because Richarlison has scored some goals in pre-season. At the moment, you've got Kane in your predicted lineup. You are going to keep him there until it's a signed thing, because he is just a minute's monster, isn't he?
Yeah, and he's even played in pre-season. He's still, unlike Mitrovic, he wasn't featured at all for Fulham. He's one to where Kane has played and scored a penalty. So yeah, until he's signed on the dotted line with Bayern, then he stays there, because if he stays, then he starts. I think it looks fairly straightforward. I think because Bentancur's still out, Sessegnon's out as well at the moment. They are circling around a centre half, aren't they? So I think at the moment is Ben Davies playing alongside Romero, but they definitely need, in a particular lineup, reinforcements, and that's exactly what they're getting by the sounds of it. So is it the Dutch lad? I can't remember his name now.
Van den Ven or something. Van der Ven.
Yeah, apparently paying 50 million for. I think he's left-sided centre back, so obviously you're going ahead and into there. Destiny Udogie is the great hope, I think, 4.5 million. He started in pre-season friendly so far. So again, with Sessegnon being out, Perisic seems surplus to requirements. Certainly not starting anyway. And then Richarlison's game time might hinge on what Kane does. He scored a hat-trick to remind us of his credentials in pre-season. Richarlison came on and bagged a treble. And but I'm almost willing Kane to leave, as much as I love him. Love seeing him in the Premier League. What a pro he's been. But it'd be nice to have more options to choose from, especially because he's listed as a midfielder. And what you want is, say, 10, 12, 15 midfielders who are viable options, because that gives more discrepancy between the teams, more disparity. More. You don't want to tempt your team, really. You don't want that from FPL. You want choices to make. It'd be nice if there was another one in midfield, in the form of Richarlison.
Yeah, well, maybe if you could perhaps just get on the phone to Harry and tell him to get lost, then we might get it. But yeah, as you say, he's going to stay in that team. It's amazing in many ways. I do love Harry Kane, just on a deeply personal level. Big fan of his, England connection as well. You make a good point. I hadn't thought of that. Just the fact that normally when players leave clubs, they're not interested. But he has been very professional and is still there and is acting as if he's a Spurs player in the traditional sense of being at training, playing the games, until he's not. So fair play to him in many ways.
Well, we've been there before, haven't we, with Man City a couple of years ago. So which is one line on that predicted lineup. Obviously, Skips is the obvious, place where that could change. I think they've still got Højbjerg, he's still there, and even the Celso's come back and scored in a couple of pre-season friendlies. And
5 million.
5 million. And Postecoglou's been praising him, but whether the player wants to stay is another matter. But Maddison's there now, of course, and it is an attacking lineup, isn't it? With Porro and Udogie as orthodox fullbacks.
I hadn't really noticed Destiny, actually, so I'm going to call him Destiny because that's cooler. I hadn't noticed him, and Porro is obviously the one who's more tested in the Premier League, done very well. But this is the beauty of tracking those pre-season, or rather speaking to other people who are doing it even more closely than me, is that people like him are going to get spotted and could provide some use to managers. Let's finish off then with West Ham, last but no means least, which I say more in case my dad is watching, who is a Hammers fan. Sorry to come to you right near the end. But yeah, we got Rice, of course, not involved in Timmy. Was never really necessarily an FPL asset, but we've got Soucek, Downs, and Paqueta as the midfield three here in the predicted lineup. My guess is it's largely provisional. Would you anticipate more interest in attack than defence this year with Rice gone?
Yeah, probably. I think especially after the drop from Bowen to, as he's 7 million now, which makes him a bit more appealing. Antonio up top is one that definitely could change because he hasn't actually featured in pre-season yet. He's actually been linked with a move away, which surprised me because Moyes loves him, and he was even starting for West Ham last season as the striker, despite the acquisitions of Scamacca and Ings. Scamacca was obviously injured for a lot of the season. But Moyes obviously loves Antonio still. Antonio has been away at the Gold Cup. I should say that. He's been away with Jamaica. So he's had a belated return to training anyway. But we haven't actually seen him since. Maybe this weekend against Levante.
Do you think that's perhaps why Mabama has sort of come into the conversation because of
Yeah.
that? Because Mabama is being talked about by a lot of people, but I haven't necessarily heard the whole, by the way, Antonio is not actually there as part of that. So do you think that maybe it's a bit of a false dawn? Well, that next game, Levante, as you say, is probably going to give us a decent idea.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think it's. I don't think he's going to be first choice this season, Mabama. I think he's going to get more game time. I think he'll get more of a look in, but probably more as an impact sub. He has scored 3 in pre-season. They have still got Ings. They have still got Scamacca, who are both now fit and have played minutes in pre-season. Again, I don't know how long-term Scamacca is going to be there. It sounds like he kind of wants to go, but I think Inter were looking at him. Atlanta as well, so he might leave. Antonio, I'm just trying to look now. Actually, I'm sure I saw a link to Everton this morning. Yeah, MLS links as well. So keep your eye on that, because Obama could get more of a chance. I would be amazed if they went into the season with just him and Ings as options, or because they are still playing in Europe as well this year. And if they do get the likes of Antonio exiting, then I'm sure they'll bring in another striker.
Probably the last question that is of big relevance to FPL managers is the goalkeeper situation, of course. Fabianski versus Areola has been a debate that people are hoping goes in a particular direction, because Areola, I think, is in like 35%, 40% of teams or something like that. Have you seen anything that perhaps gives any clues either way? You've got Fabianski in your provisional. Anything there, or are you still a wait and see like everybody else?
I'm waiting to see. The suggestion came, I think, was it from ex-West Ham employee? He was usually very trusted that this might be Areola's season to take over from Fabianski. But then again, he hasn't really impressed in pre-season, Areola. And they both got 45 minutes against Rennes. Was it Rennes on July 29th, when Areola really didn't cover himself in glory? So I don't think that's as clear-cut as we were hoping it would be. Again, this weekend, in the final pre-season friendly, it might tell us more. They're playing tomorrow, aren't they? So, yeah, Saturday, August the 5th. So keep your eyes peeled for our scout notes coming this weekend.
Yeah, that will be very very useful for teams, because especially if they have to commit an extra 0.5 in the goalkeeper area, if Areola is not going to be the one, that is going to be something that we're definitely going to want to know about. So yeah, there we are. We made it. We made it to the end of all 20 teams. There was lots to talk about, and as predicted, Neale, very helpful there, speaking with encyclopedic knowledge as always of all of these teams. So thank you very much for providing that insight. We've got, as I said, a week until the start of game week 1, and so keep an eye out for team news in the next couple of days. We'll have the press conferences next week. You usually get some idea of when the press conferences are going to be. Is that right, Neale?
Yeah.
Where you get a full timetable so people can access that and know when to tune in.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, I think on Thursday morning, it's generally on the day of the press conferences. So on Thursday morning, I'll have a heads up on who's going to be speaking that day, and I would expect it to be 5 or 6. And then on Friday morning, I'll get the list through for that day's presses as well. And again, 13, 14 is the typical sort of ratio, and they of course will be posted first as a hot topic on the site, because I like to reward the long-term site members, and then very soon after in a tweet on the FFScout account. Again, we rely on our contacts at the Premier League to send us this information. So the times sometimes change every week. Sometimes they may be out at 7 in the morning. Sometimes they may be out at 11 in the morning. We have to wait until we get sent this list by the Premier League, which is a goodwill gesture by them. So be patient; they will appear.
Yeah, it's very, very useful for sure. And yeah, of course, things can change. Sometimes training overruns or whatever. So yeah, just keep an eye on all the channels that Neil's mentioned there. Well, before we go, just one last opportunity to remind people that if you haven't sorted out your Scout membership for the start of the new season, now is the best time to do it. We've talked a little bit about pre-season minutes, and of course, all of that is accumulated in the pre-season minutes tracker, which is one of the many things you can get with your Scout membership. So make sure you get that sorted as well. If you've enjoyed this video today, if you found it helpful going into detail on some of the injuries, team news, and predicted lineups for these teams, then please don't forget to give us a like, subscribe to the channel, hit that bell notification as well. Of course, it will be very important next Friday when Neil moves from today's dry run of the team news to Game Week 1 team news proper. So if you want to make sure that you don't miss that, hit that bell notification too, and you will be able to access it in full. So with that, I'll leave you guys to the rest of your tinkering, and we shall see you next time.
Yeah, thanks for watching, and sorry for waffling. It's been on. Hopefully it's been useful.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been good to have you, Neil. And more exposure to Neil's incredible knowledge of all these teams next week. So do stay tuned for that. So cheers, guys.